And welcome to another episode of The Mark Bishop Show. This particular book that I chose in our There's Nothing Like a Good Book series, it's a bit different. And I wanted to share this with you. It's a book that really takes the mystery out of money. So I ask, is it possible to change one's financial destiny and legacy? Do get-rich-quick schemes work? Are there proven principles that do lead to financial security? Now, I don't want to bore you. We're not going down the path here of a typical, financial planning type scenario. Very different. My guest author for There's Nothing Like a Good Book in this episode is Mark Lazar, and he tackles these questions and more in Pathway to Prosperity, Your Guide to Money and Economics. It's a comprehensive financial literacy program, really, that takes the mystery out of money. And it's called Pathway to Prosperity. Mark Lazar, welcome, mate.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, contrary to what you may hear from friends, family or teachers or the government or the media, you say that regardless of your race, color, religion, it doesn't matter where you grew up or your current social status, you have the power to change, our lives in ways that we never really believed possible. Right? Now, I've got to ask you, how can you write that?
Well, Mark, if someone believes other than that, then they're powerless to do anything about it to affect change. So, we live in a country that it's easy to get discouraged because we see people that certainly are further ahead in terms of whether it's financial status or educational status or, where they may live. But we make those changes, right? And it's not, you don't have to be born to wealth. You don't have to go to an Ivy League school. It's really learning to do about a dozen things a little bit differently, a little bit better, that can have an enormous difference in your life. In other words, taking control of your financial future means doing things differently today that put you in a much better position tomorrow and 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
Well, in your book, in Pathway to Prosperity, you share the common sense principles and values and, strategies that has led to your success. But it's same old, right? Everybody's not the same. The bad news is there's no magic formula, right, or get-rich-quick scheme. Is there, Mark?
There isn't. I believe it was Henry Ford that said success wears overalls and looks a lot like hard work. And there's a lot of truth to that, is that, if you were to look at me or a dozen of my closest friends, that, we all started out about the same. I grew up below the poverty line. I had great parents. They were blue collar. Dad worked in a gas station and then was laid off, and worked in a lumber yard for a bit and was laid off, and then drove a school bus until he retired. Was a wonderful father, but just didn't understand money. And he was never quite that career guy. My mother worked in a coffee shop and then also part-time, I think, in an assisted living facility. And, they got by. We had a roof overhead and food on the table, but again, they never really understood money. So, we live in a country where it's just not polite, I think, to talk about money and finances. And so as a result that, a lot of the things that I learned by doing them wrong. I didn't have someone to put their arm around my shoulder and point me in the right direction, explain to me about, how much of a cash reserve I should keep, or, should I use credit and how to use credit judiciously, and how to invest in a 401k and, what the stock market is and how it works. No one explained that to me. And so, after I was in the industry, Mark, for a number of years, I have been asked 100 times over, what's a good book to help explain how money works? And I never had a good answer. Pathway to Prosperity is that book. That it's everything that I wish I had known when I was, in my teens and 20s. That could have explained this to me. And that's really what the book was written for, is to explain to people in everyday terms, not just how money works, but how to apply it to your day-to-day life.
Well, I mean, you're passionate about helping others achieve financial independence. I know that. It's one of the reasons I chose this book, because, I mean, if it had been another, go down the path of financial planning and leading into that, and the reason you wrote the book, I wouldn't have been interested. Okay, so in all fairness to you, there's a real moral behind this whole thing, and it takes a lot of effort to do it, and it's doing well. I'm pleased for you. In fact, Jessica Tofino, who's an educator and writer at 5 Stars, she quotes, Lazar not only encourages the reader that change is possible, but he also empowers change by showing the way forward and walking with the reader along it, and that's important. So it's practically written, easy to understand, The Pathway to Prosperity, an interactive financial literacy program that gives readers real-world knowledge. And that's from John Kelly, the Detroit Free Press stars. His angle is, look, if you want to eventually retire in comfort, this book will help you reach that goal. I would tell my younger self to read the book today. So, you can find a practical guide to money and economics and how to assess the basics. I mean, the young today haven't a clue, do they, mate?
They don't, but of no fault of their own, because, who's there to teach them? Oftentimes they won't learn from their parents. That's certainly not taught in schools. I never had a single class in high school or college that explained to me how to balance a checkbook or what an appropriate cash reserve was, or how to set up a Roth IRA, or how to invest in my 401k, how and when to use credit cards, and is that appropriate? That no one explains that to you. And so, unfortunately, that I think that we either, stumble into it blindly and make mistakes like I did, and I made plenty of them, or hopefully that, we find some sort of a book like this one that can help explain it, maybe in practical terms. That's really what I tried to do is to explain, so that not only that it gives the readers the knowledge and understanding of it, but also the application of it. So they learn the concepts, but how to apply it to their day-to-day lives. And it really, there's no magic to this, Mark. It really is about doing just a handful of things a little bit better. And it won't necessarily make a significant difference today or tomorrow, but I promise you a year from now that things look remarkably brighter. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that you can't envision exactly what those changes mean. They're powerful. Small changes today have an enormous impact on your life 5 to 10 years from now.
So what is your personal definition of financial success / let's say, stability?
Peace of mind. Mark, money never meant to me having the biggest house or the nicest car or wearing desirable clothes.
Yeah, me either. I feel the same way. It was more about having security.
You hit the nail on the head. Is it, to me, that financial success is that you never have to worry about money. In other words, I don't know about you, Mark, but there's never been a month where I haven't looked at my credit card statement and spent more than I would have thought every single month. There's never been a month in my life where I haven't had an unplanned expense. But by having your finances in order, in other words, knowing how much money comes in every month and how much goes out every month, keeping an appropriate cash reserve, using credit judiciously, it takes the worry out of it. You don't have to worry about when that unplanned expense comes and you've got an appropriate level of cash reserve. You simply write the check and then replenish that cash reserve. And then by doing that and by having a better handle on your day-to-day finances, it allows you to fund those retirement plans. And that's where the magic of compound interest comes into play. If you would have told me when I was 18 or 25 or even 30 that what my balance sheet would look like today, I never would have believed you. I was a blue collar guy initially going through when I worked my way through high school. I worked in construction for a year and a half, 2 years, and worked in the grocery industry for about the next 15 or 16 years after that. I never had, grand visions of success and wealth, but I understood that I needed to pay myself first and to keep a cash reserve and to fund my retirement accounts. And if I'd never done anything different, if I'd never changed careers, so I'd gotten my Associate of Arts degree, graduate high school after my sophomore year, went to college, finished my Associate of Arts degree at 18, and then I didn't have time to finish school because I kept getting transferred with my company at that point in time. I didn't go back to college until I was 31 or 32, I believe. and finished a degree in finance and then a master's degree in finance. And that's when I made a career change. But even if I'd never done that, Mark, that if I'd stayed working in the grocery industry, I still would have a nice 7-digit net worth from doing nothing more than fully funding my 401k and funding my Roth IRA. If I'd done nothing different, I still would have been on, a pathway to prosperity and been financially stable.
All right. Well, I look at my own life. I mean, I was brought up in an era that unless you paid for it cash, you went without. And I didn't even know what credit was, to be honest with you. And I'm, even at this age today, I don't use credit cards much. And if I do, I pay within a week. I'm just too nervous with the darn thing. You know what I mean? I just go without. But when you're in business like I am, it's a different story. And you've got to educate yourself and learn that you've got to leverage and utilize things and get tax write-offs and do this and do that. And it can be a lot more difficult. What about your childhood experiences? I mean, obviously, you talked about balance sheets and this and that. There's a lot of people, wouldn't even know how to spell it, never mind, or know what one looked like. Your adult choices, they must have been shaped from something you did. And I did notice there that came out was you were prepared to work and you had different jobs. Like a lot of us at our age, or my age anyway, I had 3 jobs going to school, and then when you do leave school, if things go wrong with the education part and you can't continue to later, then you've got to go to work and so on, and life really begins. But today, what concerns me is I don't think the young think about 20, 30, 40 years from now. And if you do talk to a lot of them, they'll tell you, hey, the way the world's going, there won't be any more in 10 years anyway. Why worry? And that's a sad attitude.
I couldn't agree more. You're right. I think that for whatever reason, that the children today, and I use that term loosely, is that the young today aren't thinking quite as far down the road. And I don't know if it's because that they're being, discouraged by the media, by their peers, by the education system. But what's interesting about that, Mark, is that we live at a time of unprecedented wealth and prosperity. Standard of living throughout the history of mankind has never been higher than it is today.
Yeah, but where is it? Who's got it? Where is it? Tell me.
Well, to that point, that wealth is not a zero-sum game. In other words, and I talk about this at length in my book, is that I think that's a mistake that a lot of people look at. They think that there's a finite amount of wealth. In other words, that if Bill Gates is rich, it's because that he's taken the money out of the pockets of the poor. A free market system doesn't work that way. A free market system, this kind of goes back to your earlier question, is that we live in a meritocracy. In other words, that this is a system that rewards hard work and effort and innovation and thrift and sacrifice and persistence and risk-taking. Those are beautiful things, Mark. They're beautiful things. Why? Because that's where wealth creation comes from. That you think about this, Mark. All of the great, wonderful ideas that we have, they weren't created by some government bureaucrat, not some commissar that works in Washington, D.C. They were created by innovators and entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, not out of some misplaced sense of virtue or altruism or for the greater good, but for a profit motive. In other words, and by doing that, by working hard and sacrificing, innovating, and having these disruptive technologies, it made our quality of life better. But again, to your earlier point, that we're living at a time of unprecedented wealth and prosperity and opportunity. Is it more challenging today? I don't disagree with that. There are challenges, but there's also opportunities that go along with that. And so the book is also intended to change people's mindsets. In other words, that on the one hand, I can see why people would get discouraged. On the other hand, to another point you made earlier, is that for those that have a work ethic, those that are willing to sacrifice, those that are willing to put their nose to the grindstone, I think the opportunity's never been better. That sadly, like you, I've been working since I was 12, and growing up poor was the best thing that could have happened to me. I had a lot of rich friends. At least when I say rich is always relative, right? That we're never rich. Rich is always that person who has more money than we do. But I grew up in a 1-bedroom studio. I slept on a cot in a sleeping bag until I was 16 years old. we had a 1960 Volkswagen van that was probably more rust than it was metal.
The good old V-dubs.
Oh yeah, and ironically, it's a classic today, and it's a very coveted car. I was mortified to get in this thing because it smoked and it sputtered and it broke down about half the time of it.
Well, you lived in what I lived in, my friend, because when you're building a media career, or you're a young fella in radio, trying to build your career in that, believe me, the money's so poor, you stay in anything, caravans with no air, God knows what, and that's the way it is. Now, look, you're a big dog with Raymond James, financial, by the way, but this book is not about, trying to flog and get more clients. I appreciate that. You're really trying to help people and get the nod across. You did come from an economically disadvantaged family, right? Thousands do.
Correct.
Thousands do. I wasn't, born with a silver spoon either. It's everything being done yourself. But why do you think so many Americans struggle with basic principles of both personal finance and the economy?
And it goes back to what we discussed earlier. It's just a lack of knowledge and understanding that people today, and maybe even yesterday, weren't taught how money works. And that's really what the point of Pathway to Prosperity is to teach people the basics of money. And those basics haven't changed. Years ago, a friend of mine gave me a book called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Ah, that's a good book. Yeah.
And it is, and it's funny because when I read it, Mark, I sort of dismissed it because it was so remedial, and at the time I think I just finished my master's degree, and I thought, gosh, why are you giving me this? I know this. I was already teaching at the university at the time, teaching it for several years. But the more I thought about it, I actually picked the book up later, probably about 3 or 4 months later, and I looked at it. And the book was written, I think, originally in 1925. It's told in parable form about, back in ancient Babylon. And the same principles that would have allowed someone to be prosperous in ancient Babylon held true in 1925 and are still true today. Those principles, Mark, haven't changed. They're timeless. And so, I really sort of piggybacked on that concept of the richest man in Babylon and took it to the next level of application. So in other words, about those basic concepts that are tried and true. In other words, that, pay yourself first, save at least 10% of what you make,
right.
Invest in yourself, give yourself an education or skill set that allows you to make a higher than average, wage earning, keep a cash reserve, ensure that things that are of value, don't take appropriate risks, but, make sure you understand what risk is. Risk is more than short-term market volatility and so forth. So I took those basic principles and converted them into something that someone can apply to their day-to-day life. In other words, into an action item. And that's really what the point of Pathway to Prosperity is. It's not just conceptual, it's the application.
Mark, you touch on many contemporary issues that are hot topics of discussion. What about elaborating on the benefits of capitalism versus that of a socialist system for both individual and, societal prosperity? Just in brief, because there's a few more things I'd like to get through with you, and we're running out of time.
I was hoping you had a few more hours to talk about that subject, something near and dear to my heart. So, Mark, there are only 3 economic models. That you've got free market capitalism, you have communism, and in between is socialism. So let me just take a moment to kind of explain each. So in a free market capitalistic system, that it's a merit-based system. In other words, it's decentralized, that it basically it's about competition. That in other words, that we want a system where people are competing for your dollars every day in the marketplace, and not because they like you. They want your dollars, and so it forces them to provide a better product, a better service, to be more innovative, to lower the price point, so that you as a consumer wins in that market system. It rewards the best behaviors. It rewards hard work and effort, innovation and thrift and sacrifice and moxie and risk-taking. All of those things are rewarded in a capitalistic system. That's where wealth creation comes from, Mark. So then you've got socialism, and socialism can be somewhat similar in and there's a lot of different definitions of it, but the way I would define socialism, that you can still have private sector ownership, typically. In other words, that you can still own stuff, you can own your home, you can own a business, but with much more government control, with much more government regulation, with much more government involvement in terms of pricing and regulation, and they may set price ceilings and price floors. In other words, they don't believe in the market quite so much. But really that bureaucrats in Washington or the capital city are much more involved in your day-to-day life. And it's more of a redistributive model. So it sounds really nice, but it takes away a lot of the effort and the reward. Communism is socialism with a totalitarian regime. And in the true communistic model, there is no private sector ownership. In other words, you wouldn't own stuff. You wouldn't own your house. You wouldn't own your car. You wouldn't own your business. But rather, the nation state would own it, and it would allocate those resources, based on their social engineering goals and so forth. But that a free market capitalism and in other words, economic freedom and political freedom are two sides of the same coin. You can't have political freedom absent economic freedom. And that's the freedom that if you don't like a baker, for example, for refusing to bake a cake, take your dollars and go elsewhere. You don't have to break their storefront window. You don't have to picket or protest. You just take your money and you go elsewhere. That's freedom, the freedom that you give your dollars only to those who provide value to you. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, I hope it comes back, because I think there's a lot of corporations in America right now, not just the massive ones, but even medium-sized, that are riding on the back of the pandemic and not coming back with the service that they had initially. They're using the pandemic as cut some corners, and people are very frustrated. No phone calls, all online. I mean, for some old devils, God love them, they think the computer's, invented by the devil. I mean, it's very difficult. At the end of the day, look, we're going to run out. What do you hope, Mark Lazar, what do you hope will change as a result of writing this book, Pathway to Prosperity, Your Guide to Money and Economics?
At the end of the day, the book is about helping people. That I didn't write this for money. I didn't write this to enhance my practice. This book is written to help people. And if it can just change one life, or 100, or 1,000, or 10,000, or 1,000,000, that's my sincerest hope, is that to make people's lives better. I've taught at the University of Utah for about 18 years, and I love teaching. It's the lowest paid job I've ever had as an adjunct professor.
Isn't that ironic? Yeah.
But it's the most rewarding. To this day, Mark, I still have students that contact me and tell me that the things that they learned in my classes 15 years ago, a decade ago,
be a buzz,
were meaningful to them. And, and it's inspiring to me. So, I feel very blessed, Mark. I've had a wonderful career. I thank God every day for, my good success and good fortune. And, we live in a society where everybody can enjoy that everybody can be prosperous, Mark. And I mean everybody. That we won't all necessarily be the next Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos.
But we're very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Can we all have a cash reserve and be debt-free and our home paid for and a fully funded 401k and no concern about what tomorrow may bring? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just about doing a handful of things a little bit better.
Oh, the land of the entrepreneurs, this is America. If you're going to do it here and be done with it. See, even Australia, we're just another island continent. You can get as big as you want, but to a certain degree, if you, depending on what you're in, but you're still going to come to the States, if you want to make it, so to speak, because it's the big market. And look at the countries who are trying to get into this country so they can be, entrepreneurial, so they can be somebody, have a life. And that's what makes the world go round. Mark Lazar, the book is called the new book takes the mystery out of money, but there's one last question, all right? One last question. There are many, many financial self-help books, per se, Mark, out there on the market. In all honesty, what sets Pathway to Prosperity apart from all these others?
I think if I were to boil it down, it's this book truly empowers the reader. In other words, that there's nothing. This isn't about necessarily getting a higher education. It's just learning the basics of how money works and taking the concepts and applying them to your everyday life. And they're really easy. They're really basic. This isn't like a fitness book that you have to dramatically change your diet. You have to go to the gym for, an hour a day. It doesn't require much additional effort. It's just redirecting, making those decisions maybe with a little bit different thought process and maybe a little bit different the way that you apply it to your day-to-day life will just look a little bit different. In other words, that maybe it's, for example, packing a lunch every single day. Maybe it's brewing your own coffee before you go to work. For example, it's taking less trips, in your car, planning those trips. Maybe instead of buying a brand new car, maybe you're buying one that's a used car instead of a brand new car. Maybe you're ironing your clothes instead of taking them to the dry. So it's doing just small things just a little bit differently that frees up significantly more money that you would never envision. What I discovered when I created a budget, and this was when I was probably in my early 20s, is that I was able to save about $300 to $400 a month. And keep in mind that this was back in...
That's a lot of money then, yeah.
It really was. This was in the early 80s. That was significant, and that was money that I was able to redirect into my 401k. That same 401k plan, which is separate apart from what I do now, is over $1 million today because of the money that I was able to put in while I was at that grocery store. So for the 16 years I worked in that grocery store, and I started out as a bag boy. That 401k today is worth over $1.5 million.
Get out of here.
From doing
I'm jealous. Go on.
A handful of things a little better.
Well done. And you know what? I mean, imagine if every kid had that chance or knew about it or did it. How different it could be today.
That's right.
Marvelous. A great book, Pathway to Prosperity, your guide to money and economics. And it's written by Mark Lazar, who just happens to work at Raymond James, one of the biggest in America, and know what they're doing. But he wrote this book on a personal level. It took an awful lot of, from what I can understand, permission to even get it done because of the genuinity of the book. So if you want something different, I think this is a great book for a gift. And it might be a nice book for if you've got a teenage child. Also as a gift, it'd be lovely. But all the best with it, bud. And, keep going. Maybe there'll be a follow-up a little bit later on.
Thanks, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Bye now.